This is The Download from Sounds Profitable, your daily source for the essential news in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. Here's what you need to know for today, Thursday, September 18th. For a top story, the podcast landscape 2025, maturity, growth, and what comes next. Responses from over 5,000 Americans fielded for the Podcast Landscape 2025 study find organic growth for podcasting has slowed noticeably as the industry matures. The rising tide that lifts all boats is transitioning into the next phase of podcasting, and those in the industry who will thrive in this next phase are those who understand the name of the game is attention. As Webster puts it, it's like the difference between starting a pizza restaurant when America was still discovering the concept of pizza versus starting a pizza place now. One must be really good at pizza to stand out of the crowd. Audiences are more savvy about podcasts than ever and are dividing up the time they spend on podcasts wisely and carefully based on what grabs their attention. The average monthly consumer follows 3.4 different podcasts regularly, an increase of 0.2 since 2023. A sign that suggests engagement among existing listeners is deepening. Up next, Canadian podcast listening reaches new high, 46% of adults. This is a look back at 9 years of Signal Hill Insights, the Canadian Podcast Listener Report. Back in 2017, 24% of Canadians aged 18 plus were monthly podcast consumers. As of this year, that number is up to 46%, which itself is a significant jump of 7% year over year from 2024. Newcomers to Canada are also making an impact, as starting last year, the report started more carefully tracking the podcast listening habits of respondents who moved to the country less than 5 years ago. The 2024 data found 76% of Canadian newcomers consumed podcasts monthly, due in part to the demographic itself skewing younger, as younger demographics already have a higher likelihood of at least being aware of podcasts. Signal Hill Insights' Matt Hurd teases that later this year, Signal Hill Insights will have more, insights about podcasting newcomers, including data to show language and countries of origin. And for our final top story, heavyweights return from the dead. This is an interview by Nicholas Qua for Vulture. While not a common story, it's not unheard of for cult popular canceled TV series to be purchased by another network and given a second chance at life. Tuca and Birdie moved from Netflix to Adult Swim, Netflix licensed new seasons of Fox's canceled Arrested Development, and Community jumped from NBC to Yahoo Screen. Rest in peace, Paul Feig masterpiece, Other Space. Jonathan Goldstein's show Heavyweight is now a notable podcasting version of that after they acquired the IP back from Spotify when Gimlet Studios' narrative podcast production was shut down. Now Heavyweight has found a home at Pushkin, and a new 10-episode season kicked off this morning. As for the rest of the news, pack your sunscreen. The Little Black Book and Friends Beach will be back at Cannes 2026. That's June 22nd through 26th. Interested parties can RSVP now with a link in the show notes today. Quick heads up here, Sounds Profitable is sponsoring the LBB and Friends Beach, and as such, all Sounds Profitable partners get access to the beach as part of their sponsorship. Inside Audio Marketing covers the first part of the Podcast Landscape Report, focusing on engagement and growth. Comedian Daniel Tosh's podcast, Tosh Show, has signed an exclusive multi-year advertising partnership with Libsyn. The Radio Academy, a long-standing UK radio and audio charity, has announced they will rebrand to the Audio Academy starting in January of next year. In New York City on November 18th, the Alliance for Women in Media will recognize 8 leaders in media and entertainment. In addition, 6 outstanding executives will be recognized, including Jenna Weiss-Berman, head of audio and podcast at Paper Kite Productions. The Published Press has coverage of the short-form music trivia show Trackstar, which you might have seen in passing on TikTok, is now being adapted into a weekly full-length podcast with celebrity guests. And finally, Marketing Brew has coverage of the annual Marketing Brew Summit, which included executives discussing how their respective companies remain agile and open to change. That'll do it for today's episode of The Download. As usual, every link I've talked about is available by clicking that link in today's show notes, which will take you to today's episode on Sounds Profitable. Or you can go to soundsprofitable.com, mouse over to the download section, and find every link I've ever talked about. Also, another quick little reminder for you, I'm taking a vacation next week, which means the podcast version of The Download will not be here. But you can go to Sounds Profitable and subscribe to the newsletter right now to get the newsletter version, which will be the same as this, just with words. And Tom Webster will keep you company throughout next week, and I'll be back September 29th. Until then, The Download is written and produced by Brian Barletta, myself, and Tom Webster. And I'll be back tomorrow morning with the Download recap before I hit the road to go look at some trains.